Well, welcome back for maybe some of you to ITV, a different office this time for the London Apple admins. We have the agenda for today, which we are slightly behind, I think. But never mind, we're all good. So, as it says there, my name is Bob Bryden. I am the Workplace Technical Lead here at ITV. And I guess there's a couple of quick housekeeping things first, as always. The bathrooms, if you haven't found them yet, there's some signs just as you go out the door. So if you go back towards the lifts, there is a door on your right, first left, and they're in there. There is no fire drills or anything planned, so if it does go off, we'll all go out towards the toilets, but straight down the stairs that are just opposite. So I'm just going to switch to my presentation, which of course will work seamlessly, because there we go. So I'm hoping that little pop-up will go away as well. Cool. Well, again, welcome to ITV. As some of you maybe saw, Channel 4 News is actually filmed down in the basement. Not quite ITV, but TV nonetheless. We'll take that. So, I want to talk about migration. If only I could migrate it. And thanks to Mark, where is he, for finding these up the back, for finding the cheese grater image. Thanks, mate. Migration within JSS. Now, there's a couple of tools that do this already. Jamf make one, which is designed to take you from on-prem to the cloud, the whole JSS, and move it across. And there's also JSS in a box from Franton, which is a similar concept. It'll allow you to take whole sections and transfer them. Now, we can also do it by hand, which I'm sure if anybody's ever done this for anything big, has spent a huge amount of time copying stuff across, then trying to find that one little tick box you've missed, which is a huge amount of time, and it's not exactly the most exciting job to do, and then get someone to check and go round and round. So, I got bored of doing this, and thought there might be a better way. So we have called it Migrator. Again, I got a chuckle, that's all I wanted, that's fine. Oh, okay. I'll take it anyway, it's fine, it's no big deal. So this is designed as it says, an intelligent migration tool. Rather than taking whole types of object from the JSS to another JSS, we take objects. So you can take a workflow, so you could take a computer configuration and all of its related items. So all of the categories and the scripts and the packages, and just shift them from one to another, rather than having to go and create them all by hand, or indeed do the whole JSS. Now, for us, this came about because we have a live and a test environment, and slowly but surely they drift apart a little bit, and you end up in a bit of a mess trying to test stuff. You move stuff from test to live, and you get some unexpected behavior because there's something either in live or in test that isn't in the other, and then again a huge amount of time troubleshooting that. So it's written as a Flask app, so it's not a huge big install. It runs nice and quickly, written in Python. It's actually built on top of Python JSS. It has just a kind of web interface to make life nice and easy. And we are planning, in the coming time, I'm not going to put a time frame on it, to make it open source. Now, for us, we've not done this before, as in my kind of department workplace. So we just need to make sure we're all good before we go out and do this. So it's also not quite finished yet. As I mentioned before, you select the object, it works out all of the linked items. So if you select a policy, it picks up, as I said, the categories, the packages, the scripts, all the other bits and pieces, all the configuration and settings. Checks to make sure they're on the other end or not. If they're not, it will copy them across. And this is an unfinished picture of what I was thinking the UI would look like. So it being as simple as you tick the policies you wish, you tick the yes, I'm sure tick box, and you hit go. And it will then show you a log of what it's doing, if there's any errors or whatnot thrown up as it goes along. This is not quite finished, the UI isn't finished, the actual kind of underlying tool does work. We've used it a couple of times. Some other things we're going to add to it, which was a separate thought from us, but again, just about the kind of difference between live and test, was showing which packages were in use by which policies, which can be a bit tricky to figure out in the JSS, especially if you have loads of stuff from back in the day. You've deleted policies, you've got packages that are sat not being used. And eventually, again, there's a screenshot in a moment of an unfinished UI. If the package isn't used, it will just give the option to delete it from there, rather than having to then go into JSS and find it. And that's the UI. Not particularly exciting at the moment, but a work in progress. So, I had a discussion on the Mac admin Slack about doing a live demo. They never go well for me. I'm yet to do one, and it's just worked. So instead, here's one we prepared earlier. So this is a blank JSS, which I will prove in a wee moment. There is, yep, there we go. I can never find anything in UI, so I always search for stuff. There's nothing in it. This is just a VM with Jamf Pro 10 downloaded and installed earlier on today, no scripts. This didn't feel quite as long a video when I shot it upstairs. No matter. So this is just running the command line version of the web interface just to actually make it happen. So this is doing a computer configuration. You can see it moving the packages across. This is a slight cheat. The packages were already there because I had run it before I shot the video to make sure it worked. Even scared my video demos won't work, but it's fine. So, again, this just didn't feel as long when I was sat at my desk upstairs. This will eventually finish. There we are. And I've also done policy as well. And we refresh the page, and there it is. Oh. That video demo works every time. Yeah, so just to prove that there is some stuff there that wasn't there a minute ago. And the actual computer configuration. And I know people aren't doing imaging anymore because it's dead, I'm told, but here it is anyway, just in case you should need it. And the policy as well. Loads of dock icons, because who doesn't love a good dock icon moving around? And that's it in a nutshell, really. It's quite quick. It does the business. I have used this to move a build from our live environment to a test environment and been able to build from it immediately, so things seem to work as expected. There's still quite a bit of work to do on it, especially on the UI. Also, at the moment, it only does Mac stuff, not iOS stuff, basically just because at the moment we don't have a need for it, so I didn't add it in. But something that we're going to continue to build on. There's a couple of little bugs and bits and pieces, but as expected at this point. So I did put a repo up. Obviously there's no code in it at the moment, it's just like a little welcome page, and there is a link to the video which I believe is now wrong, so I need to update. And to be honest, if you have any thoughts or suggestions, just stick them in there. I'd be interested to hear what people think. Anything that would be better, anything you've noticed in what I've just said that might not be quite right, please let me know. I'd be interested to hear what you guys think. And yeah, we will update that repo as time moves on. We'll put some updates on there, and hopefully, all things being well, in the future we'll have the actual code up there for everyone to get if they want it. And I think that was my last slide, so that's it for me, really. Any questions or thoughts? Yeah.
Is it, I mean, current state, it looks like it's one way immutable, so it's like, so it'd be test to prod safe.
Yeah.
It's not going to delete anything.
No. This is this is purely, it takes what's there and moves it across. It never deletes anything because apart from the package admin, but there's no, the actual migration is literally just that it copies rather than moves and removes. Anything else from anyone? Ben?
How have you dealt with things like LDAP passwords and some of the other items that don't actually, you can't pull them out of the API?
Yeah. So what's going to happen is on the UI, there's when you hit the migrate button, it actually takes you to a log page. That log page will also watch for things like those elements come up and then ask you for those details. So if it's like a firmware password, for example, it'll ask you to put in the firmware password to then pass back, rather than ending up with a blank one. It looks like a hash, but it's not really a hash.
It's really annoying.
Yes,
Yeah.
and it would also be unpleasant if you missed that, because then, yeah, you're in some trouble there. Having to find the receipt from Apple for the machine to get it unlocked again. That is one of the things that wasn't quite finished. That's why we didn't show the video demo of the UI, because it doesn't quite work like that yet, but that's certainly on the list to add in. Sorry, Sam?
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If I went from a Jamf 9.9 instance,
Yep.
okay, let's say I'm currently running a Mac OS JSS,
Yep.
and I wanted to move to a Linux version.
Yep.
Would that work for me?
Yep, the demo of the script there was actually going from a Linux 9.9 to a Mac OS 10 instance.
Way.
Yeah, it shouldn't really make too much difference, because it's purely using the API to get the information. It's not traversing the file system to find the files. There's a couple of caveats to it. So for example, you have to have a HTTP source to download the packages from at the moment. I'll try and come up with a way to solve that problem. You get into a bit of muddy water when mounting multiple volumes, because they've potentially got the same name. Things get all a bit strange and you end up moving files to the wrong place, but that's one for testing really as we go along. No, that's fine.
How would it deal, I may have missed, I think you touched on it earlier, but if you've got two things named the same,
Yep.
and your testing one is the one that actually you want there,
Yep.
and you've got something named the same, for instance, how will it resolve that conflict?
Mark and I were debating this earlier on actually. We are going to have it basically give you a diff to say this is what do you want to do? Do you want to overwrite, or do you want to keep the one that's there? If they're the same, it will just ignore it, but if the object's different, it will flag it up and say whether it will show you what the differences are, it will just give you a link to them both to say go and have a look. I'm not quite sure yet, but yeah. Any more questions? No? Cool. Well, thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to come here tonight. Has anyone here never heard of GDPR? You don't know what GDPR is? Okay. I run training every month in London, and I've always got at least one person who doesn't know what is GDPR. So GDPR stands for General Data Protection Regulation, and it's EU regulation. It's the regulation which runs by EU and must be adapted by EU member state. So it's not a directive. It's not something comes to member state and they change it in a way which suit them. They have to implement it. They have to accept it. Regardless of Brexit, we have to accept GDPR because apparently up to March 2019 we are part of EU. So GDPR is something we have to live with, because the deadline for GDPR compliance is 25th of May 2018. So you do the math. So we have to accept GDPR as it is. And also, UK government endorsed that. Information Commissioner Office, they ICO, they endorse GDPR. So that's reality. As IT security point of view, I think this is a great opportunity for whoever works in IT, because I was speaking to one of your colleagues before the start of the session. I said, how many times have you been with head of IT as a network manager, or how many times as a chief information officer you've been with CEO and asked for money and they're not giving you money? Now they have to give you money because they're accountable. If they don't give you money, they have to pay fine. And fine, you may heard of the fine, which is 4% of the revenue or 20 million euros, whichever is greater. So it's a lot of money. Personally, I think this is a really good news for whoever works in IT and whoever runs computer. Is just because they can just sit down and money will come. They have to accept you have to deal with data security. So when people hear GDPR, is it?
Sorry, no, just the keys.
Oh, just this one. This is normally comes not with IT and security people, but people who the senior management team. They cannot believe they are now accountable. They cannot believe they have to allocate possibly someone called data protection officer, but definitely someone who owns GDPR in their organization, someone who needs to deal with this issue. So whatever we were saying about data security, we were saying about encryption, documentation, security policy, risk management, risk analysis, risk registers, everything about auditing. Anyone dropped IS 27001, any of this accreditation, management just, they didn't like it. Oh, we hate these kind of things. So now they have to deal with these kind of things. So that's the face of senior managers. How many of you seen this face when you ask for money or when you said there's something wrong? I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot.
I've seen all of them.
Oh, that's so sorry, let me just go to this one. We all know about this, yeah? This is Microsoft said we don't support Windows XP anymore. Don't use it. But apparently some people in NHS they didn't hear. They said no, Microsoft doesn't understand. We keep using Windows XP. This is what happened. So these sort of things now should stop. If it doesn't stop, your organizations entitled or eligible to pay fine and also reputation and everything you were telling them for many years, now they have to face it. Sorry.
The GDPR is not public bodies is not accountable for GDPR. They had to apply to it, but they don't pay any fines.
You mean the
Like NHS,
NHS.
This happens to them, they don't have to pay anything.
we don't know yet.
No, but I've talked to like two or
Okay.
three lawyers, and they say,
Well,
because it's public money anyways, so they're paying for themselves.
this sort of question keeps coming to sessions I go. I've been with lawyers and they discuss this. But what is clear, we don't know until we have the first case goes to the court. We will know it when the first case went to court, and then we will find out what's happening. Because GDPR itself, it doesn't give you any specification of what security measures you have to use, what standard you have to use. A lot of things not clear in GDPR. So we have to wait and see the first case in court, and then we see what is happening. So right now, a lot of scary stories, whether from people like me or lawyers, but we have to see the first case. If we don't see first case, we can't make a decision on. We can't see what is actual implication. But this is some stuff people still arguing about it, like things like personally identifiable information, which is NIST and NIST. They define data, personal data based on PII. some people say PII is not a definition of personal data. Personal data is quite is bigger than what American view has got. Europe see personal data differently. So there are lots of discussion, whether as a security point of view or between lawyers. So I'm here tonight just talk about this GDPR and not go to the details of what lawyers saying, what security people saying, what you should do, what you should not do. I'm hoping at least a few comments come from you, and then I learn something because you guys working in a really unique position, which you see a lot of issues around data and personal data, which we may not see it from outside. The way we look at GDPR is quite funny because some of us looking at GDPR as it exists. Still, GDPR is something, data protection, we have it. Why we need a new data protection? And the confusion in industry between Data Protection Act and new GDPR, and how market, they don't fancy new GDPR because they fancy new GDPR, but they don't know what they fancy. They don't understand GDPR, because a lot of small and medium companies, if you go, they haven't heard about GDPR. They don't know what GDPR is about. I've got a friend who runs a company with 25 million pounds turnover. 6 months ago, 8 months ago, I asked him, what have you done about GDPR? And he said, what the hell is GDPR? And I said, you haven't heard about GDPR? He said, well, I've heard a Swedish chap once told me about the new Data Protection Act is coming. Is this about that? I said, well, it's more than that. So you see a lot of companies, large companies, they already do a lot of stuff around GDPR. They appointed data protection officer, they've got lawyers, they've got a lot of resources to deal with requirements of GDPR. But small and medium-sized companies, I'm afraid they don't have resources, they don't have knowledge, they don't have enough information how to deal with GDPR. So how many of you working in large organizations? And I assume you guys got already DPO, a good team working on data security, because I've done a lot of work with financial institutions, and they've already doing a lot of things around GDPR and data security anyway. But they, honestly, all of them paid fines. They pay fine. They still pay fines. So it's not something they're secure and they're safe. They're not safe. How many of you in your companies haven't done anything about GDPR, whether a small or medium-sized company? Good. So your companies, they've actually done something. They're doing something. That's good news. Because normally when I ask, lots of people just say, "We haven't done anything. We don't know what to do." So just let you know, GDPR is not only about electronic data. It's about written data. It's about the hard copy of papers you've got. About the written information. It's about spoken information. It's about a lot of information you have. You may not know, or you don't consider them as information. You recorded a session. You deal with some paper which left 3 years ago in your office. So GDPR concerns everything in that sense. So in what sense the PII is not enough dealing with GDPR? So the important pillar of GDPR is data protection impact assessment, which I assume, because you said your organization is doing with this, so they've already done or they're in the process of doing DPIA. That's it. That's all I can say about GDPR for 10-15 minutes. Any questions? Oh, no one's challenging me. You challenged me. Thank you for NHS not going to pay. Sorry.
Can you talk about the right of erasure, the right to be forgotten? It's quite a-
Well, that's part of GDPR, which is.
How do you see people thinking about that?
I mean, it's in terms of implementing that, it's quite easy, in my opinion. Not technically. I'm talking about how you put it in your policies, because when you create data protection policy statement, one of the things you have to consider on that is right to be forgotten, as well as consent and other stuff. So, I'm not the lawyer. I know how to drive car, but so I'm not quite sure. Right to be forgotten. I don't think technically is difficult, but in terms of putting in a policy, running as a policy, is easy and straightforward. But the important thing is your customers, your data subject, they need to know you have this policy in place and they are entitled to use that, which is the important part, because if you don't say to your data subject, which you have this policy and you're not implementing it, you cannot be Yahoo anymore. You cannot be hacked 2014 and suddenly 2016 say, oh, I'm sorry, I was hacked because I didn't do encryption. Well, I mean, the first time I've heard, I couldn't believe Yahoo didn't do encryption. I couldn't believe they don't do they didn't use encryption. Any question? Anything? Yeah.
I was thinking now when blockchain technology is developing, everything is stored in the ledger. How are you going to delete something there? I mean, if you have like a social media profile, let's say delete your profile.
It's difficult.
It's done.
Yeah.
So you make this a solution.
It is.
You
It
have
is.
to mask it or then encrypt it.
It's a contradictory, because you have to make a note of Reza's data to be erased or to be forgotten. So you have to make a record of my record, which remind you have to, or you erase it, or you have to forget. So I know it's quite difficult. It's quite challenging. But in a data protection policy statement, DPPS. It's like all of you seen information security policy. So same to that. You have to mention this. So it's part of that that set of documents when you prepare for GDPR.
Isn't that the difference between having a policy and implementing a policy?
Absolutely.
So with implementing policies, we don't particularly care about who writes them. You know, that's what the boss is for. The boss writes the policies. We actually have to implement them. How do we do that if it's so technically difficult?
Well, I can't answer that question how you can do it technically to be possible, but your boss needs to find a way, because he's accountable.
He's going to say that's our job.
Yeah,
Because he
but
writes the policies. It's up to us.
well, then he needs to.
That's the point where you're making you're now able to get the money for it. So you would be saying, they would say, we need to have this side of data, it needs to be encrypted, we need to have this, we need to have this. And you would come up with a solution saying, okay, we need to get this product encrypted, so we follow this process. But it becomes easy for you to then say, look, to implement this, we need to give us some money. So I think that's the main point of GDPR for us, in the sense that it makes it easy for us to follow the guidelines and get the money that we need to make sure that we got the especially for
I think the one of the issues this gentleman mentioned about how we make a record of the right to be forgotten and consent and right to be erased. I think that's really challenging, because then you have to you cannot make a record of the record you want to be forgotten, or so just keep that record. So I think that's the challenging part. But well, organizations dealing with a lot of personal data are different in terms of the level of activities in terms of personal data. So, for instance, if you are an investment bank or you're in school, universities, so it's a quite challenging job. And also if you're storing data, or one of your contractors store data somewhere outside EU, so you have to think carefully about what you want to do, because then it comes to the jurisdiction, whether EU or ICU is going to accept that. So it's a challenging. I've heard Microsoft making a data center in middle of Pacific Ocean. Whether it's correct or not, I'm not quite sure. Where there is no jurisdiction. Anyway, so this kind of things is a quite challenging task for everyone. But at least we know who's accountable. So they can't come to system administrator and say, "Oh, you're responsible for this. You're accountable for this." No, they are accountable. That's really good news. I'm happy for that. Any questions? If you had any questions, I'm on Slack. ISACC. So I'm quite happy. We actually created a channel called GDPR. So happy to answer questions. Yeah. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Right, okay, so this is about password management, and it's split into two parts, really. There's first the why, and secondly a little bit of the how. I worked until yesterday. I worked for an MSP, so I'm free. Anybody gets a job, and I was tasked with trying to find a way of sharing passwords between the team. Why? Well, firstly, in an MSP, you need to share passwords. It's not always possible to have an individual password for everything. So, local admin account, it's going to be one password, it's going to be one user. We need to be able to share this between people securely. Why? Well, because humans are shit at remembering stuff. We just are. We're just absolutely terrible. And that's why passwords get forgotten all the time, why we have to reset them for end users. We also want to avoid the, hey, Bob, what's the admin password for this server, or what's the admin password for that server, or this service, or that service. The reason is that's just disruptive. And what if Bob gets hit by a bus and he's the only person who knew the password? You have to escrow them somehow. And we want to store more than passwords. We want to store configuration information, we want to store URLs, we want to store notes about the server, we want to store all this kind of information. And we want to be able to share it securely. We need, because of GDPR and stuff, we need accountability and an audit trail. This is kind of really important. So what are we up against? We need accountability. We need security. So the passwords can't just be in a Google spreadsheet. There was a great story, I couldn't find it, I know I've read it, I know I've seen it on the internets. There was a great story about some great Fortune 500 company that kept all their passwords in a Google spreadsheet, and some guy from Ukraine found it, and that was just hilarity ensued. Needs to be easy to use. If it's not easy to use, people won't use it. If people don't use it, what's the point of having it? If you don't have it, then you just, it's the whole pointless everything, and we need to be compliant with GDP, as I've decided that it should be called. So, what can we use? There are a few options. We've got IT Glue, formerly Monkeybox, a very good product, and which I believe actually now integrates with Jamf Pro and does some quite funky stuff. So we've got the password management and everything, we've got documentation, and we've got the ability to store all the other stuff that we need. 1Password for Teams. I think ANSYS used 1Password for Teams, talking to Darren a while back, I think he said that. LastPass. I know that MacTribe, we use LastPass. What's the one thing that all these have in common? They all cost. They all cost money. Now, in a small MSP where we were, one of the things we wanted to try and do was to see whether it was possible to do this cheaper. You know where this is going, don't you? Open source. So, okay, fine. So let's look at some open source stuff. Vaultio. Yep. Hasn't been updated since 2014. KeyPass X. Hasn't been updated since February 2016. Most of the open source stuff is geared towards individual users, not a team. And they tend to store passwords only with maybe a notes field as well. Along comes Passbolt. I found Passbolt, and it is not in any way perfect. Alpha. It is not in any way perfect. However, it's got a really good roadmap. I think that the guys, and actually having spoken to the guys, I think Passbolt really has got a good track. It's got very good documentation, and the guys are really helpful. I had an hour and a half hangout when I screwed up the very original install, and they were incredibly helpful, and they spoke through, or talked through with me all the different things that I screwed up, and things that they're going to do in the future. So, at the moment it does groups. This is what we want, this is good. We can have groups of passwords, groups of people, and we can share passwords to specific groups of people. It's got an API. They're updating the API. It's one of the things we spoke about. So you can actually integrate things like ServiceNow, for instance. If you use ServiceNow as a help desk or Zendesk, you can call API. You can call the Passbolt API from there and pull the passwords across, theoretically. Apparently it doesn't quite work brilliantly yet. This is not something I've been into. In the future, audit logs. This is why I'm saying it's not perfect now. Doesn't do auditing, but they are going to introduce audit logs and secure notes down at the bottom there. But speaking to him, I said we need more than secure notes. We need to be able to create forms for servers. We need to have all the other information so that, as well as logging onto it, we can see what we need to see. Okay, so that's good. Install time. Choose a distro. Runs on Linux, runs on, pick a BSD, including Mac OS 10, or Mac OS, whatever you want to call it these days. I followed these instructions. It does run in Docker as well. I have no understanding or idea about Docker, so I didn't even touch it. But I followed these instructions, Debian 8 and everything, so of course I used Ubuntu 16.04 because why not? Two things you might not think of. Entropy in a virtual machine. We're going to be using GPG or PGP to do the actual encryption and authentication of the users and of the data. Who here has tried to make a PGP key in a VM? No? Right. Don't try it without installing something like RNG tools. Entropy, which is the randomness that a computer can create, which is always pseudo-random anyway, in a VM is worse than useless. Yep, it just won't create it normally. So we use RNG tools, run RNGD, do their view random, and it will start creating your entropy. Do this right at the very beginning of your install, so that as you do the install of all the dependencies and everything, it will actually generate randomness based on the stuff that you're doing. And then by the time you come to create the PGP keys, you will be entropied up. This is one of the things that got me when I did it first. I sat for hours waiting for the PGP keys and they just never made. So, run it. Easy peasy. Second thing, SSL. Now, because Passport requires SSL to communicate with the web server, it is a web server, we don't want to be passing passwords or anything over unencrypted links, so we use SSL. This is a bit difficult in a test environment unless you're very clever and you've got a CA internally and you can create certificates in a test environment, in which case, good on you. I didn't have that. So what I did was, I used Let's Encrypt, the work domain running in Route 53, Amazon's Route 53, use certbot, CLI 53, which is a command line tool for talking to Amazon's Route 53, and certbot Route 53, which is a tool which binds the two together. Who here has used Let's Encrypt? You should all be using Let's Encrypt to just make SSL certificates for whatever use. They last 90 days, you can auto-renew them, or you can just use them for stuff like this and they're free, and it just means that you can use SSL. It's excellent. External DNS to create the SSL certificates, use external DNS to authenticate it, and local DNS in the test environment. And I realised about an hour before I left that really doesn't make sense unless you can see a picture of it. So you've got certbot running on a laptop. I used this laptop here, and I create an SSL certificate and using the external DNS. I then SCP that up to the Passport server that I'm going to be creating, the Linux machine, and then when a client in my test environment says, hey DNS, I want to get to passport.widgie.net, it goes, yeah, sure, that is that IP address. Client then goes off and communicates to the server and finds that it's a legitimate SSL certificate, because DNS resolves, hostname resolves, all good. Big long command, why I put renew by default, I don't know. You run it, you put the, my pointer, and I realised, by the way, my screenshots are all shit. They're far too small and you won't be able to see them. Basically make it to the domain passport.widgie.net. Then go to DNS, of course, because I'm doing this at home now, using my own domain, I use Cloudflare, so I create a text record and then press return. It goes off, makes the certificates and sticks them in the etc Let's Encrypt live folder. Because Let's Encrypt is designed to automatically renew things, it actually points you and tells you to go where the aliases to the actual certificates are. So run and actually get the real certificates, SCP them up to your Linux server, and boom, there they are in the Linux server. Excellent. So now we've got our entropy being made, we've got our SSL certificates, we are good to go. Install time for reals. I'm doing it in VMware, ESXi. It works. Obviously, if you've got a Linux server lying around, run it on that. Is DNS set up? It's always DNS. If it doesn't work, it's going to be DNS. Okay, thank you for the picture, Piero. Have you made the SSL certificates? Have you SCP'd them up? Excellent. Got coffee? This is not a quick process. There's a lot to get through. That's why I'm rattling on like this. And this will be shorter than a live install, I promise. Steps removed and sequences shortened. Yay, let's install it. Who here hasn't set up a Linux server and doesn't know about setting up networking interfaces on Linux servers, because that can be a bit twisty? No, excellent, good. Right, then we're going to install some dependencies using apt-get. One of the things that I've done here is I've just sudo s and I'm running everything as root, which is really stupid, don't do that. We need to install some developy stuff, some webby servery stuff, databasey stuff, web gluey stuff, entropy or encrypty stuff, and then we can install Passport. You said you know how to do that. That's good. Dependencies, all the web server stuff, database stuff. It'll ask you for root password. Don't forget that password. We'll need it. Once you've installed MySQL, take the time to just quickly create database passport, return, exit, PHP, and we are done. That slide went by too fast. I think I screwed up a transition. The one thing that we don't install using apt-get is actually the GPG stuff, because GNU PG2 is part of the default Debian install. So you don't need to install that, but what you do need to install is the stuff from the PHP community library, which is the glue that allows PHP to speak to PGP. Cool. Once we're all done, something we need to take note of here, you should add extensions, UPG, to the PHP ini file. This is a thing that screwed me up. I'll come to why, and I'll come to how to get around it. Right, let's test. Is your web server working? Go to your host name. It is. Excellent. But it's HTTP, not HTTPS yet. So, jump into the Apache 2 configuration folder in etc. Now, I have tried it two ways. Create a folder, throw your SSL certificates in there, configure it to point to those SSL certificates. That's always worked. Trying to use the default place where Apache puts SSL certificates has never worked for me. So, in the bottom there, create an SSL folder. Copy your certificates into it, and then enable a few little bits for Apache, enabling SSL, enabling default sites, and then that default SSL conf file we want to edit. I've started redacting things because I realised I put an email address that I didn't really want public in there, which is stupid of me, but there we go. That just tells Apache that its hostname is Passbolt, and it points it at a directory, doesn't exist yet, we'll be making it in a second, and then does some rewrite stuff, so it'll rewrite URLs nicely for us and users will get pretty URLs. Now we want to check that PHP is working, so quickly nano var index PHP, chuck PHP info in there and go to your URL / index.php. PHP is working. If those two things are working, that's good. Yeah, that's the easy part. Now we come to create the SSL, the GPG certificates. There's a whole thing here about running PGP as another user. If you look at that URL that I had, it gets really stupid and gets difficult. So don't do it. Just run PGP or GPG, create your PGP keys, and then you export them, which we'll do in a second. This is what I was talking about. There are two PHP ini files. Two. Count them. One of them is a web for the web interface, and the other one is for the CLI. Now, I didn't notice, I didn't realise, I just edited the Apache 2. When you come to install Passbolt and you go through the installer calls the CLI version. So for the web version to work, you need to install, or for the website to work, you need to edit the web one, and for the install to work, you need to edit the other one. So edit both of them. Run through by default, just choose everything as standard, that's fine, just needing the keys for a test environment. One thing we want to make sure that we take note of here is the fingerprint of the key. We will need that in a second in a configuration file. And then we export the keys. Export secret keys into a directory. I noticed that this slide is out of order because we haven't actually created that directory yet. So sorry about that. And also forgot to take a screenshot of the second one. We're exporting both the public key and the private key. Okay, so that's exporting the private key, the secret keys, and we just do the same thing, but it's export instead of export secret keys, and then choose a different name to export it to. That's all the setup done. This is installing Passbolt. That's it. Git command. Pull it down. Then change the name to Passbolt, which is the name of the URI, the path that we put into the Apache SSL conf file, and we're good to go. Copy a few of the default configuration files and edit them so that it knows what we're doing. We need to... does anybody know what cake is? Cake is a lovely thing that you get when you... No, sorry, the other one is PHP engine that is we can build a website and web tools using it as a framework, and we need to tell it that the full base URLs is part of the rewriting of the URLs, and make sure we choose HTTPS there. If you put HTTP, nothing ain't going to work. And then we need to salt. So these salts salt our database, salt the encryption of data in the database, and we want to make sure that they are big and strong. For some reason, the cipher seed is a number only. The salt is a alphanumeric. Database connector. Only need to edit the top bit, the public default. Why there's a test thing in there, I don't know. Maybe you could have two databases. I haven't really gone too far into that. We only need to waste time on the first one. This is where you need to edit the fingerprint. We need to keep note of fingerprint. Put the fingerprint of the key in there, and then the file name of the key there. If you just leave those two at the default, then it won't find the keys, and when you go to install it, it will say, I'm sorry, you don't have any PGP keys. And email setup. This is important. One of the things that the initial install documentation doesn't say is that you really do need to set up your email first, because when you create a user, which we'll come to in a couple of slides, it emails them. And if it can't send the email to the person, you've got no way of doing the initial logon, which is a pain in the arse. If you're using G Suite, like I am, with a default install, without tweaking that file any further, you actually need to enable that. So spend some time, get your email config a little bit better. The actual real Passport install. There we go. Now, you need to run it as www.data, www-data, which is a bit of an interesting issue because you can't log in as that user because it's not a login user. So, a little bit of twisting around. Substitute user, open up a shell, pass it that command as, and run it as www.data, www.data, whatever. That's the bit that you want. If it doesn't give you that, it will give you reams and reams and reams of JSON type XML nonsense, and then you'll have to speak to the developers for an hour and a half to find that you didn't actually edit the correct PHP ini file, which is a pain, but teaches you a hell of a lot. Right, so Passport is now installed, it is up and running, it has a connection to the database, the website is up and running, the web interface is up and running, except no one's going to be able to log in because did it with no admin. Didn't create a user. So create a user, and pretty much the same thing, needs to be run as www-data, and we just pass it the email address as the username and the name of the person, and that's it. You get an email. It's really cool. Click on the link, and it opens a web browser. You need to do a little bit of browser setup first, though. You need to install a Chrome plugin or a Firefox plugin. There's no Safari extension yet. They are working on it as part of the roadmap there. This handles the PGP authentication. When you create a user, you go through, type your password, download this key, yes.
Does that Firefox extension work in the new Quantum?
I haven't tried it. I know that Quantum came out about a week ago. I wouldn't expect it to be completely terrible because on their website they were saying something they've completely rewritten. About a month ago they were saying they've completely rewritten the Firefox extension, and I think they did it because they knew Quantum was coming out. Yep.
Sorry, how long did it take you to get to that point?
The very first time.
Yeah.
It's taking a very long time for us to get to that.
What did it take me? It took me about a day and a half. And that's a day and a, about a day and a half of solid work.
I'm trying to equate that to like IT glue or something. Like,
Hold on. Good thinking. Keep that thought. Keep that thought, everyone. Yep. Keep that thought. Yep. Download this private key. Yep. This is your private key for your user that gets created when your user first logs in. This is important. If you don't download that, and if you don't have a backup copy, then if you forget your password, that's it. You can't reset your password, you can't do anything. Here is security done properly. Yep, you've got this key. If you lose that key, you're fucked. And that's it. Then you can log on. What the hell? Oh no, I pressed the wrong damn key, didn't I? Password, download. Does a cool thing. Asks you for a colour and some letters. And the reason is that every time you get a password input field in Passbolt, it will colour it the colour that you chose and put those 3 letters next to it. Who's got a Santander account? Does the same thing. It asks you to pick a picture and a word. And every time you get a password field or anything, it'll show you those 2 things. Added level of security. Type your password. You're logged in. Now we're done. A couple of thoughts though. First of all...
Was that a picture of your mind afterwards? Sorry.
Yeah, pretty much. But it's a fun learning experience. It's only free if your time's worth nothing. You're exactly right. It's been a good learning experience because I learned a shitload about configuring Apache, PHP, and PGP. But really, why? Why would you? Do you want to be responsible for security? Do you want to be responsible for it? No. Offload it. Who here runs their own mail servers? Okay, fine. Now I'll ask you the same question. Why? Office 365, G Suite, Rackspace, anybody else? Will it do the things that you want it to do? And this is true of anything, not just Passbolt. Will it do what you want in the time frame that you need it to be done by? Because if it's open source software, it's not necessarily going to be developed at the same speed. Fuck it, use IT glue. It ain't broke, don't fix it. It's cheap, it works, and I'm sorry that my talk went on so long to come to that as a conclusion. But that is the conclusion. Just use something like IT glue.
As well. Because if it's taking you a day and a half to get that set up,
and that's a test environment.
Exactly.
I've done no hardening.
Something breaks, and that's supporting an MSP.
Yep.
Then who supports that?
Yep. Absolutely.
You're supporting it, and you've got to go through that whole process again to find out where it's broke.
Absolutely. Unless
you can't get your passwords out.
unless you are a web admin and you understand how it works, there's really no point in doing this stuff yourselves. IT glue, find something else that works, or someone here start up a company that does this. Literally IT. Yes, because I really look like a... After that, you really think I'm good enough at development.
You're halfway there. You've done all the development already, you may as well build your own.
Yeah, but the point is that it is something that needs to be handled responsibly and by something that is up to the task. So...
Well, thank you for
boring you. You all stayed awake. That's the main thing.
So that we now know
not to do it. Learn by my mistakes. Are there any questions? Is anybody going to be daft enough to ask a question? Sorry? Fine. Yes.
Why generating the key in the VM takes this long?
Because entropy is crap. Because VMs are bad at entropy. VMs are bad at entropy because they don't have actual access to the hardware. They're going through a hardware abstraction layer. They're going through virtualized hardware, and the virtualized hardware, it's every time it goes down a layer, it loses a bit of efficiency. and by the time it actually gets to the process is doing so many other things, it just doesn't really care about it. That's a really crap explanation, but it's sort of true. Anything else? I'll let you get on with it. Enjoy.
Thank you.
So,
I love that one.
This is one of the online representations of me, Ben Toms, Technical Director at DataJar. I became Technical Director in summer, and that was around the time when suddenly Reza became friends with me, and now I'm going through the GDPR stuff. I'm now the DPO officer for our org. I'm the one who has to worry about the security and stuff. So there you go. Here's a promotion, Ben, and by the way, this extra is yours now. So that's essentially what that works out to be.
Give us an idea of 4% of global revenue.
It's about 2 pints. We're trying to avoid all this, yes. But we know we work with Reza on GDPR and ISO 27001, and they're interesting.
Completely GDPR compliant.
Yep, they're interesting journeys, and the whole kind of the question of how do you then remove the data once you've got some data in there and trying to figure that out. That's yeah. I'm also the boss and the guy who has to do that. So that's good work to me, and I've hired someone else to tell me what I need to do. So I'm doing really well with this so far. And as you may know, I'm also the man behind the mule, which is probably something I could phrase better. So at DataJar, we're Apple Apple device management specialists. We just look after Apple devices. We help people. They might have firewalls, looks after other people, wireless networks and that. We just worry about the Apple kit. And with this, we do a lot of stuff with Jamf. So Jamf integrators, Jamf resellers, Jamf MSP. And it's kind of the MSP bit, this bit at the bottom, is the bit that kind of brings us to what we're going to be talking about today. The MSP thing, there's our little platform called DataJar.mobi. And this DataJar.mobi gave us an idea, or gave us a requirement to build something, which is called JamJar. Now, Louis spoke about this at the last meet, and I'd realised that I've spoke about it in various places, but never actually talked about it here. So this is my attempt at a 15-minute talk from a 30-minute talk that was originally a 60-minute talk. So I'm trying to get rid of some of the faff, and I've spent 2 minutes. Well, I don't know. It's not going too great at the moment. So what and why? What is it we were trying to do, and why were we trying to do it? What were the challenges we faced? So DataJar.mobi, it's not just one single JSS. I mean, how many people here actually look after a JSS themselves? Just one. How many people look after more than one JSS? How many people look after like 100 JSSs? Me and Mia, that's what it is. So you start to have a slight problem with scale here. You start to have, especially like Rob touched on with the API stuff, trying to automate some of these things and trying to move these things forward. And things, Jamf's great. We've got all these different things we can scope to. With 9, out of the box, there was 96 different criteria you could scope off of. If you've like using Monkey and you're at your conditionals, this is kind of the stuff that's built into Jamf that allows you to do it. All that great complexity there, where you could use a lot of these things to do different things with. And then you start building out your smart groups. You might do something like this. But the thing is, the more you throw these out here, the more your little Jamf instance is going to basically bloat. The more you chuck it, it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. If you're running your own, it's quite easy. You guys can scale as you need. You can know that this policy is going to cane my JSS maybe. I shouldn't be doing a recon this often, but I'm going to let it run for a day because this fire's going and I just put it out quick and move on to the next thing. But with us, again, talking about these like 100 JSSs that we host on our DataJar.mobi platform, we start to get to a problem of scale again. And there's other things with this where it's quite inefficient for us to be going through and manually packaging up software for all these customers of ours. And and on top of this, we're not going to be able to catch some of these things. So anybody know about these co-ranger vulnerability and things like this, these malware? So it looks legit on the website. It's got a legit Apple developer cert. When you download it for a period of days, you package it up, you deploy it, and all you've done is infected your fleet. This was interesting as well, because some of the stuff with gatekeeper stuff doesn't quite protect you when it's a bit late on this, but this was something we were quite mindful of as well. And here's another problem that we've got. And these kind of slides come out. There's a friend of mine who works for an organisation, and they've got about they look after Apple devices in the 6 figures. So there's one of those walks, and he's told us we've got MSP problems because we've got completely bespoke infrastructure. We've got our own platform as a service company. We're hosted out of Telehouse and Slough, the exotic DR scenario. No one's going to nukes now. It's fine. No one wants to.
Nuclear and climate genification.
Okay. But we look at, because we host people's distribution points as well. So on average, or when we started this process, before we looked at JamJar and brought it in, we were hosting 1.9 terabytes of data across these like 100 or so JSSs. And we realised, it's really slow, we realised that we could probably get it down to around 512 gig, was we were looking at our dedupe thing. Because we were like, well, and this comes to the crux of what we're trying to do, if you're worried about what I'm trying to say. In actual fact, we're now using about 350 gig across 100 JSSs of data. And the shared data we're using, 70 gig. We use 70 gig of data. I know this might not make sense yet, so the idea is now to show what we're talking about. But these are some of the challenges, because all these things, all these CPU cycles, the RAM, the disk space, that is all stuff that we get charged for, that our end customers will then get charged for. So the idea is to keep it all skinny, keep it all lightweight, make it less of a faff for us, and we can pass on the savings to our customers. So our solution. So what we did was we looked at integrating Jamf, Auto Package, and Monkey, and it's from DataJar, hence the really cheesy name, the really like marketing transition there. Lovely, eh? Now, the good thing is, we've chucked it on GitHub, as Louis was showing last time as well. But what is it? Well, the JamJar project itself, what you need is a working Jamf install, and you need a knowledge of Monkey, or Monkey repo as well. And this is the glue that sits in between. So we have a post-flight script that runs after Monkey runs. We have a script that you run from Jamf, and then we have an extension attribute. And the extension attribute is more for your reporting stuff. What's the rough process of this? Well, we have an auto package repo in the cloud. We've got a Mac Mini in our data center that is running auto package. It feeds our Monkey repo. This is the one Monkey repo. The reason is, I mean, how many of you folks are using Adobe Creative Cloud 2017, say, one of the Photoshop apps or something? But you're all going to be using the same installer. The bit that's different is right at the end when you license it. So why did we need 100 copies? Oh, it skipped. Oh. So the main point was, we don't need 100 copies of this stuff. I'll just let that run through again. So that's how we did the deduplication, was basically we need one copy of Office, one copy of Adobe 2016, one copy of Adobe 2018, etc. We don't need to have multiple copies of it. So this runs through here. We've got the Monkey stuff installing, and then Jamf will then install Monkey on a client, use the config profile to manage Monkey as well. We then install the post-flight, and then we use another configuration profile to manage the post-flight. So you've got your own little settings there, you can personalize it as you need. How does the process work? Your Jamf policy runs a script that tells Monkey to add Chrome to the little manifest. It's a local manifest. So it's really managed locally by Jamf. Monkey runs, Monkey installs Chrome. The post-flight runs, removes it from the local manifest, and then we run a recon and update Jamf for the little extension attribute, it brings back a bit of reporting. So what we're trying to do really is, we've got a lot of brains here, a lot of intelligence here with Monkey, and you've got a lot of intelligence there with Jamf. So why are we having our servers in our data center? Why are they running hot? Why not kind of put some of this kind of workload onto these two machines, onto our local resources as well as the servers? This leads to things like this. This is one of our, we've got one customer, we've got 200 titles in our JamJar repo at the moment, and we've got one customer with 130 of them. But what we do is once every week, all managed, they're just going to check in and run Firefox and try and update Firefox. So if you're using Jamf, you'd normally do smart groups here. Graham Pugh did a recent blog post. He reckons that to cover every caveat on every step, you need 7 smart groups to install a piece of software in Jamf and make sure you don't get the wrong, make sure you don't downgrade people, etc. He's gone to the absolute extreme, and we've had a conversation about it, but it makes sense for what he's doing. And for us, we just went, do you know what, not doing 7 smart groups for Firefox for 100 JSS, no. So that's where we've moved that logic on to the client. What does it look like? We're just running that script. For us, we rebranded it, marketing. I don't know if you noticed with the whole kind of marketing background, the desktop, the white hoodie. I don't know if you noticed that's the kind of thing we try and do. But this is the JamJar script, which I said we just renamed it as our auto update. All that has in there, we've got an add to installs, which tells Monkey to install the item. We also remove it from installs because Monkey's really particular about caps. So if you forget to cap stuff or do it wrong and you fat finger, then you forever have this thing sitting there and it gets really annoying. Put it in there. Add to uninstalls. Again, Monkey has a lot of logic there about removing stuff. It's not just generally about RM in the actual app bundle. There's sometimes going to be launch agents, etc. And if someone's built it in the auto package recipe, why not grab the community knowledge and actually use that to free your time up? And remove from uninstalls again when you put that finger in. And then we've got YOLO mode. Now, YOLO mode it only works when you type in engage as well. It's because Boolean's boring. But that would just go and install it. It's not going to do the Monkey graceful thing. Monkey will normally look at things and say, oh, I'm going to install Firefox, but actually, do you know what? You're running Firefox, so I'm just going to wait. And because Firefox wasn't installed, Jamjar's not going to remove it from the manifest. Monkey runs every hour, and it will just keep going quite nicely. But if you really need that forced out, YOLO mode just pushes it out. Look at the scripts themselves when you run it. It tells you what it's doing. It's adding it to the installs, the pre-flight. So before the actual Monkey runs, it's added to the installs, and then the post-flight afterwards, you've got nothing pending, nothing waiting, no warning. So we try to keep it quite simple on what it's doing on there. The thing that becomes weird with this is because it does a recon after it's done the install, but if the install's taken 3 hours because they're using Firefox, you then can't see it in your usual policy kind of thing with Jamf. Normally you'd see the software get installed, etc. So under the history tab, you've got the hardware software history, which nobody normally uses. I've done a few jump starts, and people are like, what's that for? I don't know, it's there. But this is where you start to find it now. And it's interesting, but it helps you build that picture. You go, do you know what, we tried to install it on Tuesday, but they were using Firefox till Thursday. So for us, well, because people don't log out sometimes, but again, for us, we were trying to figure out what's the best way that we can deploy software on scale to our customers and not really annoy them. And this makes sure the software gets delivered in a secure way as well. And we have a little log file that rotates nightly as well. And every run it will tell you what's happened there. As you can see, I was doing loads of testing, so it shouldn't run every 2 minutes or so. Just to give you an idea. And it's this log file, the last current one, the last line is what's tailed for the extension attribute. So you get a rough idea of what's happened. It's because you're passing your stuff from Jamf to another management or another system. You don't want to set up Monkey Report, you don't want to set up SAL or anything else on top of that. We try to avoid that additional burden of additional server-side resources, because that would kind of defeat the point of reducing the server-side resources in the first point. So it just tells the line. So simply, what we just saw there, one installed, not removed, not pending. The other thing we found as well, with Jamf, you've got your policies, you've got your start message, you've got your end message. Now, your start message and end messages come up anyway. You set them like this, look okay, your notification's there. But if that bit in the middle completely and utterly fails, don't worry, you've still got a start message, you've still got an end message, which can make it a bit tricky sometimes. Because people go, well, why has it installed Firefox 5 times today? Well, because the first 4 times it actually failed for whatever reason, so the 5th time it's now worked.
Sorry, just to add, I actually tried to break that with a middle install in between, so skip 39, 39, skip 40, went 41, and it still worked.
Okay, cool. So talking about some of the examples, some of this, the preferences and config parameters you set. So the Jamjar post flight, you can set the wording of the text for it. And what we're going to show you is what happens here. So basically, the idea is Monkey runs, or gets instructed by Jamf to run through the script, and Jamf says adds an item to the manifest. And if Monkey installs the item or whatever happens, you might want to send the user an alert. So there's some settings we set here. One is the log file directory, so where do we write the Jamjar log, and what message do you want to send? Notify message if it's been installed, if there's no items pending, if there is an item pending, the title you want to give the message, if the item is up to date as well, and there's you see some variables in there, $S, if you like using Python, you should recognise them, and also the notify sender ID. So on here I'm actually using MSC, Managed Software Center, which I'll show you an example of this in a bit, but you can use Terminal Notifier, etc. In fact, we are, in these examples, these are all the default ones that you'll get because you're going to use the management agent. So this is a default text, and the text is kind of explaining the wiki. But Google Chrome such and such has been installed. So if a user's sitting there working and they're not running Chrome, it installs, they'll get this as a message. Obviously they could put do not disturb on, but they'll get this as a little message. By the way, Chrome's just installed, that's it. If they run it through self-service, they run these policies, then they get told, oh, the latest version of Google Chrome's installed, or what have you. We've not had to do anything else. Although we're still using that one script with that one set of variables in there. If an update's pending, because there's a conflicting process, or maybe it requires a restart, or whatever you've set in Monkey, they'll be asked to log out. I didn't go through the logic yet, which is something that Louis found, where I just tell people to log out. I don't warn them there might be a restart afterwards, because I hadn't thought about that. But Louis made my life difficult, so I've got to think about it now. But so, essentially, just log out to complete pending updates. So if there's a conflicting process, they have Slack open, or the machine asks them, or the thing asks them to do that, we'll just ask them to log out. And then Monkey will kick off right there at the login window as well. If, say, it's Google Chrome again, and you've asked them to log out to install pending updates, but they're still running Chrome, they close Chrome, and it happens to be a Monkey run happens at a time, it will advise that the install's happened, and then they get another note to say no updates are pending. So the idea is it's just meant to be like a simple UI thing, a UX thing, just to let people know what's happening. Try not to make it really nagging. And here's an example of this. Now also, this is where we started to brand it again. So with our customers, it's the Auto Update framework, and it's from DataJar. This is our DataJar.mobi logo. As much as certain vendors are trying to get people to click buttons to accept certain things all the time, we're trying to get people to kind of feel confident when they see our logo now. That's the idea. So by peppering this a little bit, it shouldn't interrupt their day-to-day working, particularly, but they should feel comfortable that that little symbol is something they recognise and they know their device is being managed correctly. So ask there to log out, the person closed Slack, so Slack's installed, and then been advised there's no updates pending. And if you're using this, using Monkey Rebrand from Bear Goodstein, it's awesome. Just did it with Monkey 3 as well. Very, very simple. So we've rebranded the whole thing, including the login window. So it all ties all the experience in. As an example here, so I had notification. I'll click the notification because I've told it to use Managed Software Center. In this instance, it will actually open Managed Software Center and give them the reason why as well. So you get this extra detail. The Managed Software Center here is completely locked down. It's rewritten, rebranded, but completely locked down, but they get notification. Maybe you don't want to tell them it's being removed because they might never, ever, ever log out then, but it's still handy that we can just use that monkey logic. And here's another example. This is something I was messing about with over the weekend. So with Monkey 3, they've added in the Start OS install support. So you actually do OS upgrades using Monkey. So we've got a little notification there asking the user to log out. And again, this is one of those videos like Rob was doing. Oh, this was really quick. It was 50 minutes long and I edited it earlier on while I was here. But the idea being they get a prompt, they get to log out, and the Start OS install kicks in, they'll get upgraded. This will also happen if they're at a login window. They'll get they get their Monkey status screen. Will come up in a sec, like that there. Whereas, again, there's not provision for this potentially built into Jamf at the moment. So this is a nice thing that we can offer out, and we can start doing this. We've got some people in labs with a couple of hundred Macs that want them all upgraded to High Sierra, but they're on ID, so we're trying to make them wait a little bit. But once some of these things get settled, then we can start to use this process to move them on. But again, for us, centrally, we're using one Monkey repo. So we've used like 11 gig of data for the 1012 and 1013 installers for all these customers. And we've got a workflow that's working for us. Very simple, very lightweight in regards to Jamf usage. Off we go, and that machine is now running 1013. There we go. So that was a real kind of blitz through JamJar. So I did an hour-long talk about this in Macaduck, and we've done a talk to this at the University of Utah, and there's some stuff on MacMule as well. But just after Louis mentioned it last time, I thought it was good to just kind of put it out there, some of the rationale of what we're doing and some of the madness. But it was quite funny, you guys saying about, what happens when you roll your own stuff and it breaks? Yeah, so it's great when you do stuff like that and then it breaks. But it's been a really good, we've had it in now since February. And we've over 200 titles in now. I've also worked with the team on the Creative Cloud recipes, if anybody uses them in the Auto Package. So the CCP-recipes, so you can have the Auto Package drive the Creative Cloud packager and automate all of that. So when the Adobe was it Creative Cloud 2018 came out the week before JNUC, I think.
Exactly.
And there's 20 or so titles there. Just let the thing run. And off you go.
It brings up the correct names and everything. It recognises everything. It doesn't skip a beat.
And that's the thing. It's all this community collaboration, and we're all kind of freeing up our own time to do it to be more available for our users and things. Because you don't want to be sitting there kind of manually packaging software. especially if you do it wrong and you haven't verified the source, etc. And this all works.
To be doing the packaging stuff manually.
Yeah, and this, of course, is all going to work alongside your VPP, etc. And so there's other decisions around that. When would you do VPP? When would you not? But mostly, this is the kind of that software that isn't available under VPP, and it's certainly made our lives easier. So, I thought I'd give you a quick overview. So, thank you for listening. I'm not skipping questions. I just didn't know if anybody actually had any questions. So.
It's question time now.
You want me to skip questions, don't you? Wow.
That bad, no question.
Yeah.
Fantastic, but would have been better with the human traffic slide included.
Yeah, can you do that one again? That was good.
Where is it? Wait 1 sec.
Spotlight then.
I think it's this one. Right. I don't know if you're going to be able to hear this too well. I've turned up the speakers on here, but this is DisplayPort only at the moment. I've had to turn on DisplayPort, so you might lose the sound. It's fine. Doesn't matter. So just to preface this a bit, this is a presentation we did at Macaduck in February, and a certain Greg Neal was in the crowd watching us present, and we're trying to talk about Monkey and stuff. So talk about Monkey, and I was trying to explain the concept of how catalogues work in Monkey. I mean, everybody here know how catalogues work and manifest in Monkey? Yeah? You don't? No? So the idea is, well, this will answer all your questions, possibly.
Any jungling guy?
I got the Tarzan and Jaded jungle just swinging on the vine this morning, mate. I'm telling you, this could turn Hare Krishna into a bad boy.
There we go. Well, that's how Monkey works. So, yeah, we'll just leave it at that, I think.